there's actually no tolerance for violence of any kind, certainly not physical violence of any kind. So the only time we ever moved is a faculty member. Many years ago, I remember, in front of client comments, punched a student and knocked him out.
Oh my God.
One of the more bizarre incidents. But actually, at that time, there was a tremendous amount of actually faculty groundswell on his behalf, which we didn't share. So, violence is not. Second, sexual violence has to be complete zero tolerance, absolute zero tolerance. The real question is, what is our proper role in the regulation of your private life? So we live in a culture that has confused violence and sexuality on a daily basis. In every film, in every popular culture, all through its music, all through its advertising. And there's a hypocrisy about this. So we get students, mostly from the United States, who come from a culture where this is completely confused. The definition of manhood, the definition of attractiveness is so tainted by this problem. Then the question you ask the university to regulate it, which is what Title IX has done. We're not competent to regulate it. So what we've done is, actually we're not on the list by the feds of places that have a black X next to them. Because actually we have pioneered in what now is the standard practice of the right way. So anybody comes forward with an accusation of sexual assault, it's investigated by an external party. We don't do our own investigation, we hire a professional. And they are invariably women whose expertise in sexual violence, and they do an investigation. And then they recommend an action. The question is, we also, by Title IX, whether we like it or not, have jurisdiction on the behavior of students who live off campus by mere status, their status as a student. So to answer your question, the entire higher education community is in a turmoil about how to do this. We're in a little bit better shape because we early on invented a way. We have a very prominent woman lawyer whose specialty is this field, who gave us very good advice more than a decade ago. So we've never been sued, it's an expensive way to do this, but it's the right way to do it. And we try to do our best in the education. Now, I don't doubt that it's imperfect. I don't doubt it's imperfect. The question is whether we can achieve more. My ideal circumstance, if I say this to students, you may have remembered this when you were a first-year student. The first thing I say in the first night you're here is that being sexually active is not a requirement for graduation. You know, the safest way to avoid this is do nothing. Consent under Title IX, not in the civil courts, the criminal courts. Consent is the most dangerous part because we have had cases where people retrospectively go back to a consensual relationship, let's say they did in their freshman year, first year, when they're juniors or seniors, and look back and say, that wasn't consensual. We are forced to investigate it. The civil court out in the civil society, the standard is higher. You can't go 3 years out and say this. You can if you have physical evidence, very, very difficult to do. So we're baffled. So we love your opinion of students. How do we actually put an end to this? Are we in a position to do that? Are we in a position to for us to regulate your private life in a way that gives us assurance that nothing is going on, would essentially put a secret police, a surveillance system in place. Do you follow me? We're caught between the respect of your privacy in your adulthood and our absence of intrusion in your private life, and then being held by the state and by you, not you individually, but someone, as responsible to do something if something bad occurs. So let's say there is an accusation of sexual violence between two students. We can't say it's none of our business. We have to investigate it. And the punishment can be expulsion. You people don't go to jail, they just get expelled from the institution. Right? Or suspended or sent away. From a person's point of view, the accused person's point of view, the standard of proof under Title IX is not the legal standard. It's a preponderance of evidence. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. So the standard of proof within universities is basically X said and Y said. And the investigator has to decide who's more credible. Now, most of the time, obviously, we have a tendency, humanly, why would somebody bring a complaint if it weren't true? In other words, so you have there's a bias, natural bias, understandable, I'm not being critical of it, to the victim. Has to be. But people who are concerned about due process and rule of law and the presumption of innocence are very critical of this, but it's been imposed by the federal government. We also are very uneasy about opening the entire campus to the free reign of police. We don't think that the whole tradition of the university is being somewhat protected from the armed peacekeepers in the society. On the other hand, some institutions are saying, we'll get out of this business, it's the police's problem. You have a problem, go to the police. But most of the complaints about sexual harassment and violence fall below the criminal standard, and so you can sue the individual. But most people want redress through the institution, and we're obliged by it to do that. We could do a better job in education, particularly of men. We could probably do a better job in telling men, particularly, that the definition of consent has to be more profound than they understand it. So someone can comprehend that saying nothing, saying no means that's baloney. But it may mean that yes doesn't mean yes. In fact, it's not a bad thing to say, look, intimacy is hugely explosive, is dangerous. You don't have to be Sigmund Freud to figure that out. So you're playing with fire. And you're going to play with fire. Consent has to be considered. Clearly it can't be with drugs and alcohol. It can't be spur of the moment. Maybe it can't be without a relationship. It can't be about real consideration of it. Even though the person said yes, not drunk and not impaired, they can claim that they felt pressured. Right? So the image of the male as the seducer is an inherently dangerous idea. My advice is to tell all the men, don't talk, let them ask you, and document it. You know, the issue is much less. Interesting, the lowest incidence of sexual harassment claims are between women. That is the most civilized. That's clearly the most civilized. Next comes men to men. The worst is heterosexual. So the statistical evidence is that same-sex women is the least problematic. There are cases, but they're few and far between. Men to men is an issue, and many colleges have been embroiled in very tough cases of that. The most common, like Virginia, are heterosexual. Places like that. But you know very well, our preaching to you about your personal sexual life is about as much chance of efficacy.
But you can't equate sexual violence to intimacy.
Clearly not, but the interpretation of what is violent is subjective, it's not objective. That's the problem.
It's about power.
She's a ready philosopher. I don't think you're wrong or right, but you now have a particular point of view. Now, I may be an idiot, but I have actually never been involved in I can say this, in an intimate circumstance where I actually thought it was about power.
I'm talking about sexual violence. I'm not talking about intimacy.
Yeah, but sexual violence is not only about power. It doesn't come through